And we are live, everybody. It is good to see you. It is good to be seen by you. Please welcome one and all to the Nerd Council of Doom. That's right. You thought you were safe because it's a Saturday and you're not. Welcome to my esteemed fellow hosts we have with us. Oh, I guess I should probably turn this on so everyone can see. We have the Dungeon Minister, Yang Yan Zhao, and myself, the Dungeon Delver, once again advancing our plans for total world takeover, one pop culture phenomena at a time. Gentlemen, how are you? It is good to see you.
It's good to be seen. I have to tell you, I didn't realize until very recently that that's what we were doing. I just thought we were hanging out and talking. I didn't know it was world domination. I would have brought weapons or something.
Well, you have the you have the might of the church behind you.
Way behind me.
But anyway, gentlemen, what is on the agenda today? Yang, what do you got? What's happening in your world?
Well, there was a bit of a kerfuffle. Apparently, it is not only Wizards of the Coast that doesn't want people to play their games. It is also Paizo.
I saw that. Yeah, I released an exceedingly unpopular video about that topic the other day on my channel, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but good Lord, if it makes people stop unsubscribing, I would certainly appreciate it. Yeah. So what happened here was, did you hear about this, by the way, Padre?
Oh yeah. No, I've had my head stuck in a hole for the last. Of course, I've heard about it. Yes, I saw. I saw.
All right. So what we had, for those of you who may not be aware, let me get this up on the screen here, prepared as always. I did a video on this. If you would please go check that out and maybe subscribe to take that crater out of my weekly subscriptions. I'd appreciate it. So there's a cat over at what do you call it, Paizo. Now, this was back in August of 2024 that he made this statement. But Jason Bullman, who's, I guess, the number 3 guy over at Paizo, released this statement back at the beginning of August of 2024. And people kind of jumped on it this week. I left it alone because I thought, well, stupid people say things on the internet. What's new? And it kind of ate at me a little bit. And I saw a lot of people talking about it. So I kind of got on the subject too and released a video again, which I guess some people didn't like because I wasn't being hard enough on him, or I was not. I was not. I don't know. But this isn't about me. This is about Mr. Bullman. And he says, if Vance, referring to Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, has played Pathfinder, which, for those of you not in the know, is the clone of 3rd edition D&D that was released by Paizo back in 2007, has a fairly large audience, wants to... if Vance has played Pathfinder, I want him to send his book back. No space for fascists in our game. And so so basically Jason Bullman doesn't want J.D. Vance to play Pathfinder.
I just have to ask, was there any indication that he did, or was this just out of nowhere? It's just like shooting in the dark. Did he actually say at some point that he had?
Yeah, and that's just I don't know.
That'd be a strange thing.
Yeah, like like Topps saying, "Oh, by the way, Elon Musk, don't buy our trading cards. We don't want you to." And to my knowledge, Elon Musk has never said anything about Topps trading. So I don't know from whence this came. I do know that Jason Bullman deleted this tweet. But Paizo themselves, and I can't find a screenshot of the email, folks. I apologize for this. Paizo themselves said that they value free speech And if their employees want to speak freely, that's just fine. And furthermore, Jason Bullman's statement aside, the only return and refunds they'll honor are for their usual reasons that they would honor that.
Not because someone has been specifically told to by a member of their staff.
Right.
Well, now in Jason's defense, he technically does not say he's going to refund the money.
That's true.
The books back.
Very, very true. I mean, I could stuff all of my D&D stuff in a box and mail it to P.O. Box 756, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. I could send them back. God knows what the guy, they would go into the dead letter office and then get auctioned off at some point in the distant future. But, or whoever owns P.O. Box 756 would be probably very confused. Which leads me to another thing. Do you think that person gets fan mail to TSR?
Well, that's what I was just wondering. Sure. Is it who owns it?
Yeah.
Is it some little old lady?
Yeah.
What is this Dungeons and Dragons?
Lake Geneva is not a big town.
They'd have to know.
They'd have to know that they have the P.O. box that TSR previously had.
Maybe it belongs to Thelma Susan Reynolds, and she keeps wondering why people send her $1.75 for their subscription to Dungeon Magazine.
What do you mean you want Dungeon Magazine? I don't know. She just sends them a VHS tape copy of Sleeping Beauty or something.
I did the Google on Dungeon Master, and it's filthy.
I don't have any black leather clothes. Anyway, but some people asked some questions. Tim M. Holt says, Vance is known to play Magic the Gathering. Good for him. I don't play it. Don't care for it.
Well, he did. And not to get too political, but I think is either Time or The Atlantic that actually ran an article about J.D. Vance's favorite card and what it says about him as a person. And as you can imagine, it was not good.
It probably says he wants to win the game when he plays.
Yeah.
That's probably why you have a favorite card.
I can't remember what the card was, but first of all, it was a black color, which is supposed to represent necromagic. And it was something like you play it and you take energy from other people to restore your own life force or something. And their opinion was that is bad for the country.
Yeah, I know bupkis about Magic the Gathering. I played Magic the Gathering once in like 1990, like literally one hand of Magic the Gathering, and I was like, this did nothing for me. Sorry, fellow dorks out there. I'll have to, we'll have to get a Magic the Gathering member of the Nerd Council or something. But anyway, you guys are chatting this up out there in the chat. Emmy points out a lot of people were blocked by Paizo, people who mocked Jason Bullman or whatever his name was. Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that's a particularly good look either, but you're also not obligated to listen to people that you don't like. But I will say this, that because I said this in the video that I did, I don't care what your politics are. Leave them away from the table always. Don't bring your politics to the table, and we won't have political disagreements at the table. Just take them and go away. When I play a TTRPG, I'm there to escape the real world. No, not all art is political. TTRPGs are not art that needs to be made political. So as far as I'm concerned, it is a non-issue as far as people's politics at the table. I still think this is a very bad look, though, for Paizo.
Yeah, it's not great. It sort of suggests like it's lining up in the culture wars in an utterly pointless way. As I say, is there any evidence that he plays it to start with? It's jumping both feet in to something that nobody sought out their opinion on the matter. No one's the one, gosh, American politics is complicated, but what does Paizo think of it? That's really,
exactly. What, I think it's important for us to make a sharp political statement right now in the middle of a time when people should be coming together. I think I should jump out and be divisive was a really bad look on Bowman's part and Paizo.
Well, I mean, to make it even worse, Wizards of the Coast has not been having the best couple of years. People are starting to look at alternatives, and where would people normally go? Well, Pathfinder and Castles and Crusade. So Pathfinder is kind of I would say the biggest alternative to, if you're not counting previous versions of D&D. So people would naturally gravitate towards there, but then they look at this and like, oh, well, no, I'm not going there. So you just screwed yourself out of all the potential players who were looking to jump ship.
Yeah, well, it'd be the same thing if he came out and was a fanboy and was like, yeah, that's awesome. Come play at my table. You guys are the best. It's like, just nobody cares what a game company thinks about politics. I care what kind of game you designed. Yeah.
Now, I would also like to point out to everyone there, if you hate me or you hate my politics, I just want to point out that if you want to buy 10 or more copies of Empire of the Undying Sun to burn, I will happily give you a 10% discount.
Oh, that was brilliant when everyone was piling on what's her name? Famous Scottish wizard book.
Oh, J.K. Rowling's?
Yes, and to say, well, we are burning your books, like you still bought it. So
yeah, exactly.
That didn't hurt me at all. I guess if you burn the library's copy, but then the library will just buy another one, so it's not going to do any good.
Yeah, they don't give fines anymore. It's crazy.
Yeah. So,
what library do you go to? We get fined all the time.
Really? Oh, down here we don't fine it because that would discourage people from borrowing books.
Like telling people that it has no value?
Basically.
Oh, well.
I remember our local branch library near my house when I was a kid had the Core 3 AD&D books. They had them in the card catalog. They had space for them on the shelf. They essentially were never there, ever. Like, you just forget going in. I'm going to check this out. Yeah, no. People would disappear with them. And if they got brought back, they'd get lent out just that quick. But anyway, so
on the topic of books, I need to bring up, and also from a time before politics entered everything, I got a lovely gift because of a mail strike, slightly late, but it was sent on time, of the Chronicles of Amber from this angle so that it doesn't shine. The Chronicles of Amber. Lightmane sent me this. This is actually a 2-book thing. This one's got the dust jacket though, with the awesome
cool.
Oh, excellent.
The awesome He-Man kind of image on it. So those are pretty cool. I started reading it last night. It starts like on the operating table. It's an interesting opening for a book, but pretty cool stuff. This is the thing. It's like, oh, this is still out there, right? I think the people who make the modern stuff and they're getting all trenched and they forget that we could still go to the used bookstores and buy these things and they're still cool, right?
Yeah. So I don't have any more thoughts on this. I put them in the video that, again, apparently people hated. But gentlemen, any final thoughts on this topic before we move on?
Don't be Jason Bowman.
Don't be Jason. I like that.
If Mr. Vance and Ms. Harris and Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump all want to come over to my place, I'll run a game for them. I don't care.
Woohoo!
Really don't.
Let me tell you something, Father Aaron. I'm going to play a fighter. He's going to be the best fighter. He's going to win bigly.
Best fight that's ever been played. People won't believe it.
You won't believe how good my fighter is. I rolled him up at home, all 18s. But anyways, So yeah, I think I saw my subs dip before. Now for that, anyway, so
Some say the best fight. Yeah, some say.
some say the best fighter. Look, Darokin is sending orcs. Some of them may be good people. I don't know.
It's sort
They're
of
not sending their best.
it's sort of Donald Trump. Donald Trump as played by the name's got on my head. I don't know.
Christopher Walken.
Yes, thank you. It's Donald Trump played by Christopher Walken. There you got going on.
Well, thank you, I think. Anyway. So what else is hot and controversial, gentle folk? I think, Yang, there's something in the comic scene, perhaps, that we wanted to...
Oh my gosh. When is there not something in the comic scene? Do we need
a little media up on the screen for this?
I'm afraid of what might pop up. But, we could be discussing how bad the next Captain America or Thunderbolts will be. But unfortunately, we have to bring up longtime nerd, one-time fan favorite, and current questionable action person, Neil Gaiman, who unfortunately is the latest in a long line of, well, I'll say it, women's rights supporters who have been accused of doing horrible things to women.
Yeah.
It's much easier in the abstract, I find.
Yes. So
call me master.
This
why do they always look like that?
I will link to the article if you guys want to read this. Now, this is absolutely positively something, if we start going into the salacious details, will be the end of my channel. Let me see. So you guys can read this.
Neil is, most famous probably for his work on Sandman, but he's written a bunch of novels, several other comics. He has recently had Netflix specials, including Sandman and American Gods on, I think it was AMC. Sandman season 2 is supposed to come out soon. Not good timing for Netflix.
No.
The upshot is the New Yorker article details the story of one very young woman who basically had no money and became I don't know if it was really babysitter or au pair, since she seemed to live there, to Neil Gaiman's son and Neil's wife, who I'm all of a sudden blanking on.
Amanda Palmer.
Ah, yes, thank you, Amanda Palmer, the rock star. So supposedly they had an open marriage, which, all right, whatever. And then they closed it.
Not a good plan, folks. Just if you're looking into it, don't.
Yeah. And I'm sure you get a lot of counseling from stuff like that. Then basically this young babysitter, Neil, said, well, whatever. And according to her, forced himself on her many times. There's also the story of he bought, they owned land in Woodstock, New York. And there was a 50-year-old woman who was part of a husband-wife duo who were sort of caretakers. I forget. It was quite many acres, like 25 acres or something, and they took care of a lot of the groundskeeping. And there is the accusation that Neil wormed his way in between the marriage and got them to break up, and then had his way with a 50-year-old woman. And supposedly there are at least another 14-year-old, not 14-year-old, excuse me. There are another 14 women that his now ex-wife Amanda Palmer knew about. This The comic scene, for anyone who does not know, is like plagued with accusations of this, and the people who scream more about women's rights and equalities always seem to be the ones facing these accusations of going after young women at Comic-Cons and stuff like that. So unfortunately, another one bites the dust.
Yeah, this is one of those things that we here at the NCOD, we got to be really careful as far as the specific salacious details on. Go check out the Twitter post from New York Mag, read the New York Magazine article if that interests you. I read them. They were pretty stomach churning in places.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Jack out in the audience, and thank you very much, Jack, says that, well, I'll just put it up on the screen here. I will stress that while I can see these allegations being true, they are simply allegations.
Well, that is true. And I would also like to point out that supposedly Neil and Amanda Palmer's divorce was quite acrimonious. And who knows if these allegations are part of, an attempt to get him to pay more alimony, to get more child support, child custody. We don't know because nothing has gone to court. However, you end up with a bunch of women on opposite sides of the earth who have no reason to know each other, coming up with very similar stories, which, I don't know. Now, and I would also like to point out a guy who has said he uses magic and writes a whole lot about conjuring demons. Is it really so surprising he might be into this kind of stuff? You know what I'm saying? Could he be possessed? Who knows? Who knows?
I think he's possessed of his own self-importance. I mean, I know we're all nerds here. I know, but what makes a person think that being big in the comic book industry equates to making one a sex symbol or like, please, I drew the Sandman comic does not make one sexy at all. I don't know how you traffic on that and think you can then just no.
Now, I will say, I don't know why anyone exactly would be surprised if some of these stories were true, because when has a man who has women throwing themselves at him all the time, like we've never heard of a man taking advantage of that situation. So even if the more salacious, non-consensual stuff isn't true, like if he is picking up women at Comic-Cons who really want to do the deed, is that any different than like the heavy metal scene or, CCR back in the 70s?
That's not the accusation, though.
Well, that's part.
I mean, it's some of the background. It's some of the background details, but that bit no one's having an issue with. But it's the
there are a number of people in the comics community who have an issue with it because there have been accusations of other people who only did that and did not do any of the more heinous activities, who have been accused of being horrible sex pests over the years and basically have been canceled. And it's like, well,
yeah, well, it's certainly creepy, but not illegal.
Yes.
This is a whole other.
Yeah, and I just want to point one thing out just to kind of lighten the mood a little bit. Can we reflect for a moment on how Neil Gaiman looks very much like Sam Waterston pissed his hairstylist off? He does. He does look like Sam Waterston, and somebody just said, "Let's do the messy look, Sam." And he's like, I have a History Channel thing I have to. No. This will be perfect. Go. And he's just like,
I was thinking he looks like Jeffrey Rush after a particularly bad night, but and Jeffrey Rush already looks like Jeffrey Rush after a particularly bad night.
Yeah.
I just looking at this photo, it
Dollar store.
I hate to say it, but it really makes me wonder how he smells.
Oh,
Like this is the look of people who can't take care of themselves.
Thank you now for doing that. That was
this is like when I'd have to start thinking about patients. Like, okay, do I need to refer them to a psych consult?
Yeah. So by the
like
way,
sulfur.
like sulfur. Gin and cigarettes would be my guess.
No. Oh, speaking of gin and cigarettes, David Lynch.
David Lynch. That's right. I guess we have to talk about the passing of people. The great David Lynch. I consider myself fortunate, and I don't say this with even a little bit of irony. And I want to get an image up here. Let me see. I want to put this up here because here was a guy who visually could set the mood for a room. Doc Flamingo, thank you very, very much.
One to Nick Nolte. He shoots, he scores. Well done, Doc Flamingo.
Of course, the late great David Lynch, a titan of filmmaking. I count myself fortunate that I did get to see a David Lynch film in the movie theater. Yes, it was Dune, and yes, I think the 1984 production of Dune was brilliant. I know Lynch preferred his final theatrical cut. That was always his take, was that the movie that comes out in the theater is my preferred cut. You are getting what David Lynch wanted you to see. And so that's why when you boot up your copy of the 4-hour version of Dune, there in big, broad, chiseled letters on the screen, it says, directed by Alan Smithy. He wanted nothing to do with the quote-unquote director's cut of Dune. But he was so much more than that, Lynch was. Twin Peaks.
Yeah. That was my first introduction to what absurdist, to the very weird in art, and it was, I'm living in Janesville, Wisconsin, right? There's no edgy anything anywhere, and then that comes on, and like, what? By the end of it, little people talking backward, and Aiden Cooper, such a beautifully strange palette.
Yeah, and let's just take a step back and it's amazing that this guy could get something like Twin Peaks put on the air. It's just so bizarre and out there for like the average American. Somehow he was able to con ABC into letting him do it, and it was glorious.
Yeah. And there was all this sense that it was going to lead to something, and it led to more and more rabbit holes. It just got weirder is all,
Now that kind of makes me wonder, was he in some way responsible for J.J. Abrams?
Let's
no, in the same way that Da Vinci is not responsible for paint by number sets. Okay. Because someone is trying desperately to fill a niche that they perceive as, themselves as capable. No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yes, the soundtrack was just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, Julie Cruz and Chris Isaac. I mean, it hit around the time that I think pop music was kind of adrift. There was stuff that would rise and sink. This was kind of, we had the Athens scene. Grunge was kind of simmering. Hair metal was essentially dying at that point. So there was techno was kind of fading in and out in the background. Gangster rap was starting to build up ahead of steam, but there was a period when the quiet, creepy sounds of Julie Cruz or the retro Billy crooning of Chris Isaac can be heard on the radio thanks to Twin Peaks. And I always thought that was really, really underrated music and such a good find by Lynch and his production team to produce that. Now, the superlatives I could heap on Lynch and his filmmaking, we'd be here all day and well into the night. So, Yang, favorite Lynch film, go.
Probably Dune.
Dune. Okay, Padre.
Yeah, I've got to geek out in the same direction. Although, if I'm going to pick one, my preference cinematically is no. My preference in terms of story and production is the Villeneuve Dune, but in terms of design and icon, the '84, the Lynch Dune, is brilliant.
Now I love Dune. I absolutely adore David Lynch's Dune. And I mean that unironically. I have friends who are very into film and they regard it as a guilty pleasure, like Plan 9 from Outer Space or Bride of the Monster or, something like that to do their own roasting, their own MST3K on. I unironically love the film Dune. But I got to say, my favorite David Lynch film is actually probably Blue Velvet. Blue Velvet is disturbing. It is not for the faint of heart. It is multi-tiered, multi-layered. It's a crime film. It's a murder mystery. It's a teenage romance. It's a May-December romance. It is surreal. It is violent. It is genuinely frightening. There's some jump scare stuff in there, and then there are bits of black comedy. I can't say enough good about Blue Velvet. If you haven't seen Blue Velvet, guys, if you got an art house film or a art house style film showing theater in your area and they're going to show Blue Velvet, check it out. Don't take a date. Let me just tell you that. Unless your date has already seen Blue Velvet and likes it as well, don't take a date to see Blue Velvet. But it is absolutely worth your time.
Yeah.
So
well, I hate to say it, but there is yet more comic news.
Oh dear.
Oh dear.
On the horizon. Luckily, this one does not involve that kind of impropriety. The comic distributor Diamond, who was the largest comic distributor and unfortunately gave us the direct market model, they have filed for bankruptcy. So for those who don't know, once upon a time, there were many distributors of comic books. All of them were pretty shifty. And Diamond basically took over. And what happened was they said, hey, comic book stores, we will give you deep, deep discounts if you buy from us directly. And eventually they stopped selling to... that's why we don't see comics in grocery stores, in supermarkets, in gas stations, and all the fun places where we used to. So they concentrated on comic stores, which for some reason, people who weren't interested in comics never went in. And they are finally out of business after at least 10 years of record numbers of comic book stores in North America shutting down. Now, they are supposedly restructuring, and they have sent a letter to comic companies and to comic stores that say, "Oh, no, nothing's going wrong. We're just want to restructure some debt, blah, blah, blah." But unfortunately, this is yet another nail in the coffin of traditional Western comics. Yes, I'm looking at you, Marvel and DC. Now, there have been other publishers in the last couple of years to come along. Penguin, for one, I believe DC has been distributing for them for the last couple of years. I know from having many guests on the channel that Diamond would do things like they would just lose whole shipments of comics that came from the printer. And their response to the companies was, "Oh, too bad, so sad," which, really hurts when you're talking about very small comic publishers who couldn't absorb that kind of thing. They were shipping things out late, which is, of course, bad for both the publisher and it's bad for the comic stores. They need to have new comics in every Wednesday to get the people to come in repeatedly. And when you look at it, nobody's having trouble selling manga. So the question is, what happens to the North American comics industry? And to me, it seems like it's on its way to being a boutique business.
Yeah, and okay, so I've harped on this before, and I'm not even a comics guy, but I just want to say real quick, thank you, Gonzalo, very much for the super, and thank you, Jack, very much for the super. Really appreciate it. Helps keep the lights on here inside the control room for the Nerd Council of Doom. Really, really appreciate that.
You'll have to let me know specifically what sort of blessing you're looking for here, Jack.
Yeah. I mean, £2, that's like what, 450 Canadian? That's a pretty good blessing.
Yeah, more like $5-6.
Yeah.
I hope that's not 30 pieces of silver.
Yikes. Diamond's death, and let's be 100% clear here. Okay. I have seen a lot of my favorite things go through quote unquote restructuring over the years. Diamond is hold beneath the waterline. All right. If there's anything left at the end of this, it's going to be another company called Diamond. That somebody will move in, hollow out the corpse, and inhabit the body politic if they think there is enough good left to the brand of Diamond. But Diamond dying, and a lot of people are making the comments about I'm actually getting to that, Cerulean Rex. Thank you very much. A lot of people are aware that I've mentioned this and I've harped on this. This is a symptom. This is a symptom of a decade, going back to 2013, probably even sooner, of simply bad comics and bad comic writers. Okay. Comic books decided in 2014 to start catering to an audience that doesn't spend money. I've gone on and on and on and on about this. In the 1980s, was that when Jim Shooter had his reign at Marvel, Yang?
Yeah.
In the 1980s? Yeah. Okay. In the 1980s, if you went to Jim Shooter and said, I have an X-Men spin-off book idea, and he said, okay, X-Men is hot, do it, go for it. And then you came back with the sales results, which he would have actually had before that, and said, hey, my book did 50,000 this month. You would be fired right then, right there. You would be gone. You would be donezo. Because an X-Men book that couldn't ship 500,000 to 800,000 copies. I mean, sold. I mean, spinning racks, grocery stores, dime stores, and not just main comics dealers, you'd be gone. The business model, Cerulean, that hurt the stores was not Diamond's. The business model that was hurting the stores was Marvel's and DC's awful writing and pandering to people who wanted ideology in their comics and not good stories to sell to the audience that had been supporting them since the 1950s and 1960s. They said, we're firing you as an audience. You know, we're not about superheroes anymore. We're not about telling good stories anymore. We're about a message. And what that did was that audience doesn't spend money. They don't spend money. And the net result was that, you know, Diamond was backed into a corner. People weren't buying books. I mean, you know, a mom and pop store gets told by Diamond, we've got 25 different X-Men titles this month. And they're all preachy, you know, superheroes should be zapping supervillains, thwarting their plans. Yes, having some angsty moments, right? I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
You get really good writing out of Demon in a Bottle, a fantastic Iron Man story, The Death of Robin in Batman. It's just some amazing stories out there that were good stories, well written, and they sold in the millions.
And yeah, and there were certainly social messages in the comics in the 70s and 80s. It was not like they were in there, but that they were freight that the story carried rather than the engine for the story.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'd also have opposing points of views, like one character, you know, a lot of the writers were on the left politically. So, you know, maybe they make the main character left, but then they would have like a sub character who was more on the right, and it wouldn't be like good guy left, right guy bad. It would be, you know, conflicting points of view, which, as everyone knows, conflict, not necessarily fighting, leads to drama. So they were able to use that as a tool. One thing I would point out to Cerulean Rex as well, part of the problem goes back earlier than that. And that's something I mentioned, the direct market. So the direct market is basically when comics were no longer available in normal places to buy. The problem is the ecosystem for American comics were pretty much, you know, the newsstands and the supermarkets and the drugstores. Those were like plants. And then you would have a level of herbivores above them who would devour the plants. And that was the comic book stores. They would buy these back issues. They would have specialty items, which were more adult in nature, or maybe they were imported or something that wouldn't be as commercially viable for mainstream for mainstream distribution. And then you had the end consumer who would buy what they want. The problem is, once you got rid of the ubiquitous aspect of the comic, you start getting generations of kids who don't grow up with American comics anymore.
Well, if you've got, I mean, like if you've got a town of 50, 60,000 people, you've got one comic book shop.
Right.
If you've got 6 or 7 grocery stores, dozens of gas stations. And that's where I always got my comic books, as a gas station, and they had the comics rack, the magazine rack up above. At the top of the magazine rack, the magazines in wrappers that you couldn't open, you know. But at the bottom, there were the comic books. And that's where you'd get it. Your average kid's not going to the one comic book shop in town. And this is, again, 70s, 80s. If you were going there, it was on your own steam. Mom wasn't driving you, you know.
Right.
So that's where you'd pick it up. It'd be like McDonald's saying, we're just going to have one place, you know, in a strip mall in town, in a town of 50, 60, 70,000 people, just one of them. And you can go there if you want it, you know.
And I mean, I often use the argument, I don't go to golf stores because I don't play golf. And because people never picked up the comics habit, they never go into those stores to look for the other materials. Now, there's a lot of other things that go into what exactly went wrong. And one other thing that people forget is you had newsstand distribution, and at least through the mid 80s, somewhere in the late 80s, comic book companies actually used to send you comics if you subscribed.
Yeah.
In every issue, you could find like, hey, check off the comics you want, like $10 a year for 12 issues of G.I. Joe and stuff like that. And that's one thing that Diamond talked the publishers out of. Like, hey, don't do that anymore. We'll just sell direct. And, you know, in some ways, comic book stores were great because you couldn't go on the internet and find back issues back then. So if you wanted to get part of that story, you had to find a physical copy. And where are you going to get it? You're going to get it at a comic book store. And also they had, and that's where they started to get like these like toys like you have now. They would have deluxe like collector's editions and all these enhanced products that you couldn't have like a trade paperback that was this thick sitting on a spinner rack at a grocery store. It wouldn't sell, but you could do that at a comic store, and the returns on that were much greater because the publishing companies had already paid for the artwork and the marketing. Right. So this is basically, they just have to pay printing costs and then all the profits go to them. But again, it's short-sighted because if you don't have those new people coming in, nobody's going to be interested.
There's no intake. And if you haven't said, oh, well, you know, for $1, I'll grab this comic book, or today, $3, $5, whatever they cost. If you don't have someone who's, you've gone to the store with your mom, you're bored, you've already convinced her to buy the chocolate frosted sugar bombs, you know, what else are you going to do? There's a minuscule toy aisle with some knockoff He-Man figures, you know, called Superman, or not Superman, be Big Man or some bloody thing. And then there was a comic book rack, and look at that. Can I get this, Mom? Yeah, it's $1. Sure, throw it in, you know. And then it's like a junkie dealer, right? The first one's free, kid. And now, what do you want? Arkham Asylum? Come here.
Yep. So Cerulean Rex asks, Yang Yan Zhao, are you saying Diamond restricted the ability to buy from them so much that they all shut out all the non-traditional purchasing places? There was a little bit more that went into that. Part of it has to do with Diamond was giving better deals to a lot of the comic book stores. That's number one. Number two, the stories I've heard from many people is that Diamond just wasn't doing any sort of advertising as a distributor for any of these products. So what you saw in the stores is like they were eventually shrinking the number of books that they had, and eventually they just disappeared. And part of that is because there was no marketing to the supermarkets and whatnot. They weren't willing to cut them any deals, volume discounts or whatever. It ended up that, you know, having another issue of Quilting magazine or something on the racks became more cost effective for them. And that's because Diamond wanted to concentrate just on the comic shops.
Yeah. Very, very true.
Bob Hastings, his first comics were 10 cents. God bless you, Bob. Oh. God bless you. Yeah. I have some of my dad's old comic books, or I had some of my dad's old comic books. Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos. Yeah. And they were like, they were 10 cents or something, 15 cents or whatever. You know, old stuff.
Yeah. Marvel, they had some second tier comics in the 80s, like Star Wars initially. I mean, because after Jedi, Star Wars just kind of started, in terms of pop culture, just kind of started really to decline in terms of popularity.
It wasn't an engine to keep it going.
Right, exactly. So early Star Wars, I recall in the 80s, had that little starburst splash up in the corner on the pricing. Still only 35 cents. So, your X-Men, your Incredible Hulk, your Spider-Man, your Captain America, Thor, Iron Man, that would set you back 50 cents a copy. But if you wanted to sweeten the pile and get the latest Star Wars, find out what happened after the Death Star was blown up, that would only set you back 50 cents or 35 cents. And then I think it was like the summer, as it was a big deal around my nerdy lunchroom table in middle school. I think it was like the summer of 83. You started seeing 75-cent comics show up.
Yeah.
And we were like, how can we sustain this?
Alvin Maid brings up the Marvel Transformers. That one got
awesome.
Really dark too. I remember one in which Optimus Prime's head, his severed head, was being kept powered in some cave because what was the replacement for Megatron, the better version of Megatron?
Galvatron?
Purple. It was purple.
Galvatron, I think.
Yeah, is it Galvatron?
Shockwave.
Yeah.
Well, in the movie, he was turned into Galvatron.
Yeah, it was like it was another gun, but it was like a laser gun. And anyway,
that was Shockwave.
It was Shockwave, and he'd taken over from Megatron, and maybe it was Megatron's head too. I don't know, but he had there was all these pipes and cables hanging out like guts. I mean, like spinal cord and stuff. It was really gritty, really intense. And you get the Sunday or the Saturday morning cartoon or the after school cartoon. A thing blows up and everyone jumps out. Nobody ever actually gets hurt, even though they're robots. Nobody actually gets hurt
until the movie
was hardcore. Yeah, the movie. Yeah. But this comic book was hardcore.
Yeah, you had a female human that worked for the Decepticons binary. Yeah, they just like grabbed some poor random woman and started like ripping parts of her out and sticking robot parts in.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And said, "Oh, okay, you work for us now." And like, I remember reading in the Handbook for the Marvel Universe or the Transformers guide or whatever they did. Yeah, she was like in constant pain. Like every moment of her existence was agony, but she still enough of her brain had been taken out and replaced by the Decepticons that she was a willing servant of them. That was not. that was dark. That was really dark.
Very dark. And I was reading at that time. You think if talk about second tier, I read a friend of mine gave me his copy, and that should have told me Power Pack. Does anyone remember Power Pack?
Yeah, heck yeah, I remember Power Pack.
These 4 kids, and it was really kind of like discount bin superheroes because they were kids, and but I enjoyed it for a little while, and then I followed it for a while, and it kind of spun off, and I'm like, okay, I'm done now. It didn't have staying power.
Well, for the 80s, Marvel actually seemed to have a graduated plan where there were books like Power Pack, where you would get the younger, like much younger kids, then you would graduate into something like New Mutants, and then you would age up into regular X-Men, which was a fantastic plan, which Marvel really needs to get back to, where you can have different levels of storytelling, where they're like some things are fairly basic and fun for kids, and then things get more mature, interpersonal relationships. New Mutants had all sorts of dating and relationship stuff, and X-Men had people selling their souls to the devil, and it's like, wow,
what was it? Daredevil. Daredevil went to a place with demons, and it was really, and all the demons were very spiky. Everything was very spiky, and it was very dark. It was sort of battling interior demons, and it was some serious.
I believe that was the Ann Nocenti run, which is most people would say Frank Miller had the best run on Daredevil. I disagree. I think it was Ann Nocenti.
Really? I don't know who drew it. I wasn't ever anyone who checked out who the artists were. I just like, that's Daredevil. That's what they're doing now. I never focused on the artists, but
I think it was John Romita Jr. drawing at the time. who is quite famous these days.
One that saw, like, it opened to critical acclaim and unfortunately did not see enough popularity to continue its run. Although I imagine its unpopular sales would be lusted after by Marvel and DC today, was a Marvel title, The Nom.
Yes.
And their original plan with The Nom was they were listening to people who were willing to share their experiences in the Vietnam War, and their plan was an issue for every month of U.S. involvement, and they started it back in like 1963. People have this image of Vietnam of being like 1968 to 1975, but really we got boots on the ground in the early 1960s, and their plan was every month of the war, that the war lasted, they were going to publish an issue for it, but it did not. It unfortunately did not persist, and they got gimmicky towards the end of the run, trying to generate people's interest. They had the Punisher show up. They did a crossover with is the original story of Iron Man. Those of you who may only be familiar with the excellent, I should point out, early mid-2000s film. It is essentially the same plot, but instead of him being in Afghanistan and coming up with the Iron Man armor, he's in Vietnam and comes up with the Iron Man armor.
Right.
And so they said, oh, okay, well, we can do a crossover here. Maybe that'll spark people's interest. And it kind of started to slide slowly back towards the Marvel mainstream. And then if you kind of start to think about it, if you've got these superheroes, like actual capital S superheroes, Iron Man, Captain America, Fantastic Four, Thor, Spider-Man, so on and etc., in the United States, and you've got these soldiers facing, an implacable foe in Vietnam. Well, why doesn't Spider-Man just show up?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
and
Watchmen did that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why isn't Captain America helping break the siege at Khe Sanh? Why is why did Tony Stark not go back and help liberate the city of Wei and so on and et cetera? And you're absolutely right. Alan Moore did that with Watchmen. He had Watchmen show up, and it did, basically as everybody stood around and watched what's his
Dr.
name?
Manhattan.
Dr. Manhattan win the war. But yeah, it was the same premise. So while it would have been neat to have seen Marvel do the entire run like they had planned, I'm glad they didn't let it turn into a superhero comic.
No.
But that was the kind of stuff that they used to do, that Marvel used to do. And
well, which is yet another what exactly happened to the comic industry. Because if you go back in history, there were always a lot of war comics. There were war comics before World War II and through World War II, and those were popular up until the early 80s. And then I believe the Nom was actually quite popular when it was originally released, but not too long after that, people just really wanted to stop talking about Vietnam.
Yeah, it's part of it.
yeah,
There were fun stories out of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Because with the Nom, the only other really popular war comic was G.I. Joe, another toy comic. And that was in the top 10 in the industry for several years.
Mm-hmm.
But I was just going to say, if you go back to the 70s, you'll find all sorts of science fiction comics, fantasy comics, romance comics were very big, but for some reason in the 80s, everything got concentrated to capes and cowls, which is also part of my what went wrong, because entertainment changes. What's popular switches over the years. And it's another reason why manga is so popular, because it's got so many genres. You can always find something you want.
Sure, I'm getting a visit from the dog. So.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, Yang, and that goes back to that goes back to occasionally when people dare question the health of comic books. And I haven't seen this lately, but they would say, comic books are huge. They're selling amazing. Look at the numbers from, well, Diamond can't anymore, but look at the numbers from Barnes and Noble and from independent shops and that sort of thing. And they are appropriating the sales of manga and saying comics are doing great. That manga is currently the Dungeons and Dragons of comics, and it's the vast majority of what people are buying in comic books in retail sell-through is manga, and they're saying, hey, comic books are as healthy as ever. And it's kind of starting to grate on American comic book companies and on American businesses, because now you're seeing there are a lot of fan servicey manga out there. Okay. There's a lot of manga that is geared directly towards an adult audience. Well, all of a sudden you're seeing a lot of pushback against manga, like, ooh, no, that's weird pornography, and we can't, we can't be selling that. But you're never saying this specific title and it's just manga. Right. And it's a pushback because they're getting destroyed in the market by manga, even to the point that Visa is now, or rather recently, Visa was saying, well, we're not going to allow certain titles to be ordered using a Visa card.
What?
Yeah. Visa was getting to where there were certain titles they were refusing to pay process on. Again, it's adult stuff, but
is an adult buying it? I mean, I say this as a priest. If an adult is buying it, who cares? Yeah.
I mean, worry about that on confession, but it's not.
Don't put me out of business.
Yeah, it's not. And I think it goes back to. I hate to say this because I'm not this kind of YouTuber and I don't really talk about this, but it goes back to DEI. The Japanese stuff is geared towards a very specific audience and a very specific mindset, and it's not the audience and it's not the mindset that companies that are inured with DEI want to promote. And Visa is one of the companies that has drunk deep from that cup. So I think it's a little protest. I mean, to kind of skate a little bit more towards that, you have American translation companies who have deliberately altered the dialogue in translations, and they hide behind there's cultural differences and we can't say, it just wouldn't make sense to a Western audience. I remember watching this clip and I didn't really know I was going to go off the cliff like this. So I apologize to my fellow hosts here about this, but there is a clip in an anime where a young girl goes to her friend's house. She's wearing a very revealing dress and her friend says, "Oh my, you look so cute." And translated from what she said in Japanese, she said, "Oh yes, do you think the boys will notice?" The American voice actress instead said, "Well, I'm just doing my part to fight the patriarchy." Like, what in the hell has that got to do with anything in this scene?
Yep.
So
even more recently, Netflix had a remake of the classic Rama 1/2, which is the story of a martial arts fighter who fell into an ancient Chinese spring that transforms him into a girl every time he gets wet.
Yeah.
So it's actually a very sweet show, if you wouldn't believe it. But there was a line of dialogue where his rival fell into a different spring that turns him into a pig when he gets wet. And he's making fun of the main character. And he's like, "At least I'm not a girl. or at least I don't turn into a girl. And the main character in Japanese, he says something like, "What, are you calling me a girl?" But the translation said, "Oh, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with being a girl?" You know, and it's like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. It's, and I think if comics continue to collapse and Diamond, here, I'm bringing this back onto the freeway, guys.
Oh, very good.
Diamond being both a symptom and a cause of that, a cause with their business model, but a symptom because comic sales just suck in general because of bad writing. You're going to see more and more push from American companies to say, hey, we don't like what's coming through. We need to narrow that pipeline and make sure that passes through us. I mean, I am honestly shocked we have not seen Marvel just basically re-importing their manga back into the United States and retranslating it, since kids like manga, because there is Marvel Comics and DC Comics Japan, and it's done by artists in those countries. I'm just amazed that they're not just re-importing it and sticking their terrible storylines in there. Thank you again, Jack. Jack is making sure my kids get a good dentist visit this month with the supers. Thank you.
And one of the nice things about manga, speaking of the many different genres, Padre, have you heard of a book called 1 Pound Gospel?
No, have not.
I have read 1 Pound Gospel. It's awesome.
You have?
I have heard of the Gospel according to Peanuts.
Well, 1 Pound Gospel is written by that same author who wrote the gender-bending Kung Fu series. And it's the story about a woman who is on her way to becoming a nun, and she meets a man who's a boxer, but he's a terrible boxer because he is guilty of the sin of sloth and gluttony. He just eats too much, and he's a terrible fighter. So he wants to win her love, and he makes himself into a better boxer to fall in love with her. It's such a great story that I don't know why we can't publish things like that over here.
Yeah. And there is never even the hint of funny business in 1 Pound Gospel.
Yeah.
It is absolutely, it's heartwarming. I think the first chapter was published in An America magazine is where I read it, because I didn't buy the manga, but I have a few years worth of An America, and I remember like the first chapter of 1 Pound Gospel being published there and being like, hey, this is kind of sweet. This is kind of nice. So yeah, Diamond going down the tubes. It's kind of a cell phone that is space owned, not cell phone. They have owned themselves.
Yes. You make me want to be a better man.
Yeah. So, anything else on that, gentlemen?
I think that's all the comic news for this week.
Speaking of comic news, not comic books, but I had wanted to mention this earlier. This is a real. This was kind of a cruel blow. Let me see here, because we had another loss, perhaps not the same weight as David Lynch, but Bob Uecker, 91 years old.
Really?
Bob Uecker was still alive? Oh my gosh!
Alive and kicking. He was. He played for the Milwaukee Braves. I think most people will probably know him either from Mr. Belvedere or, of course, as the great Harry Doyle in Major League, which is the best sports movie ever, hands down.
I know him from the commercials that he was doing. What were they for?
Right around the same. It was Miller Beer.
Was it Miller?
The Miller Beer, the official beer of Major League Baseball for many years, and he would always show up at baseball games thinking that he was going to be treated like royalty,
like a star. Yeah,
like a star. And the punchline was, you'd have a couple of event staffers show up and say, Mr. Euchre, you can't sit here. And he's like, oh, I must be down in the front row.
yes.
And, they would extol the virtues of Miller beer. And then the punchline is he'd be sitting in the nosebleed behind a concrete post or something like that. And trying to make the best of it, right? Saying, oh, you get much better view with these seats up here, right, buddy? So, yes, we salute you, Bob Euchre. A long, storied career, film, commercials, a baseball great, the voice of the Milwaukee Brewers, actually, for many years. Bob Euchre.
Oh, and that card game he invented, too. No.
Note to self: lower the oxygen levels in Dungeon Minister's chamber, or raise them. Yang, which should we do?
Both. Actually, yes. when I was a kid, I did think that they had something to do with each other. Because I lived in Wisconsin, so I heard Euchre all the time, right, on the radio.
And I'm sure if you'd given him a moment, he probably would have enjoyed the confusion. But yes, the late great Bob Euchre, 90 years young, taken from us too soon. Loved him in Major League, loved him in the commercials, and in Mr. Belvedere. Go with God, Bob.
Mr. Belvedere.
So what else? Have we seen any good movies?
I see nothing.
Well, Netflix released the second and possibly final season of Castlevania Nocturne, which became quite a divisive series, and I was quite surprised about that.
I saw some of Castlevania, and I liked what I saw. I didn't think it was bad. Now, before you guys start mailing me dead chickens or something like that, I played the first video game when it was on the
NES.
Well, there were the arcade games, the Versus arcade games. It had like a bunch of NES games built into it. And I would give Castlevania a try. But Yang, go ahead and tell us about the TV show a bit.
Well, they had Castlevania, which they brought back several years ago. It ran for 4 seasons, and it was pretty well received critically. People really seemed to like it, and it kind of started off the genre of animated shows based on video games that were aimed towards late teens, early adults. So they came out with Castlevania 2, Castlevania Nocturne, which no longer had a medieval setting for it. It was set during the French Revolution.
Which nothing to do with what he's talking about.
That's fine. I am looking for Castlevania Nocturne media to share. So until then, doggo.
If you're gonna have a setting where bloodsuckers can walk free, the French Revolution would, it's a pretty good setting. Lots of blood flowing there. But it's weird because at the end of the first series, an army of vampires and demonic night creatures almost completely took over Europe. And then this is like 200 years later or something. And nobody seems to be on the alert for vampires anymore. So it was weird. You have Netflix inclusion push. So you have some things make sense. Like this lady is a vampire who was originally from Egypt, and she's hundreds of years old. Okay, that makes sense. But the French military had a woman in command of a battalion, which was like, huh? You had a monk who was almost openly gay. The priest that you see behind her is obviously evil. It became weird and cliche, and some things didn't even work within its own within its own lore. But the animation itself was absolutely gorgeous, great color palette. It took Castlevania from a simple let's kill vampires to like introducing different gods and spirits and everything. I kind of liked it. I thought it was interesting. They got to a point which seemed like a natural end for the season, and hopefully they will keep it that way. As much as I enjoyed it, season 3 doesn't need to happen as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that I have come to appreciate growing up, and all of us here, by the way, I caught that little slip of the tongue, Yang, Cancelvania. One thing that I have grown to appreciate over the years are are closed arcs in TV shows.
Yes.
Let shows end.
Yeah.
I
The
think
British are
that-
very good at that. The British wind it up. They're like, okay, that's enough.
Well, I mean, and I think to a fault. I think sometimes there are other things that they could have explored, and stuff just dies on the vine. There's
you know
there's
what
a joke.
the saying is, leave them wanting more, right? The British office is a great example.
Yeah, there's a joke in The Simpsons where the PBS, which most of us here south of the border. Well, I mean, Padre, you grew up here, so most of us got our Monty Python's Flying Circus from PBS first. And Monty Python's Flying Circus was 3 seasons, I think 4, maybe. I don't recall. It wasn't a huge amount of episodes, but there's an episode of The Simpsons where they're having a fundraiser, and they said, and the announcer is voiced by Betty White, says, we're showing Britain's longest running situation comedy, all 19 episodes.
But on the other hand, there's Coronation Street and EastEnders, which just, I mean, there are tortoises that have died. They were born and died in the run of this show.
And that last Father Brown series.
Yes.
South Pacific macaws that have expired. Since
whole nations and literally have come into existence and vanished during the run of EastEnders.
Yeah. So I look back on like stuff like American TV shows, and my favorites are the ones that did end. I think as much as I loved it, MASH probably lasted 4 seasons too many.
Oh, we shouldn't have let Alan Alda direct. Don't let Alan Alda direct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think Magnum PI, and a number of other great detective shows CBS and NBC put on were really great because they were brief runs, whether they had planned that or not. Because a lot of American shows that had short runs still just kind of stumbled to the end, like ratings tanked, and they just said, okay, stop making it. It wasn't by some design, but the shows that are by design, like we have a middle, beginning, and end. And that's it. Babylon 5 springs to mind. I think a great example in another great British example was Spaced. If you guys have seen Spaced, that
Haven't seen it.
Oh, Spaced is amazing. It is Gen X geek comedy. It hit in 2000. So right as we were all hitting our 30s, late 20s, early 30s. So it is rife with early internet, the Star Wars prequels get roasted regularly on the show. And it's all about a group of Gen Xers just starting to cross a line where it's not, hey, let's go to a club 4 out of 5 nights a week. Now they have to get jobs, and they have to at least pretend to be responsible people. And it's a lot of it's them coming to terms with that. So, I do recommend Space, but Spaced has an arc.
Right.
a beginning, middle, and end, and then that's it.
My favorite on the British shows that the British Office is up there, but also the Detectorists. It's a beautiful little show. Mackenzie Crook wrote and stars in it, and Toby Jones is in it as well. And it's gentle and winsome and charming, and it's a bunch of. I mean, it's a nerd show because it's a bunch of metal detectorists, and they, the passion they have for this hobby, which is such a dorky hobby, going out metal detecting. But it's lovely, and it has all sorts of like very small scale drama, of jealousy and relationships breaking up and all this kind of stuff. But it's hilarious, and it's really, really very, very funny.
Oh, that's cool. I'll have to.
And it's another one that it had, I think, 3 seasons, and that was it. People are like, "I'm going to do more," and it's like, "No, I think I've done everything I wanted to do with it." So no.
Yeah, and people had asked Simon Pegg. He was one of the driving forces behind that. Hey, are you guys ever going to do another run of Spaced, another series? And he said, "Well, I would only agree to do," and this was back like 15 years ago. He said, "We would only agree to do it if everyone was on board with it." And I can't remember the little dog's name, but he said, and unfortunately Maggie has passed away, so we don't know what she would have wanted to do. So probably not. There was a dog on the show, and the dog perished. So they used that as a kind of a foil for, no, you're never going to get any more episodes. We said what we wanted to say. So I am glad and sad for you, Yang, that a cartoon you liked is finishing.
Yeah.
No, I'm happy. I mean, I thought it went out on a relatively nice note. I mean, there was a weird, horrible opera singing subplot, which I hope to God never gets brought back. But overall, it was a nice show.
But was it worse than The Power of Two? The Power of One? The Power of Many?
It's I don't know how we would get worse than that. I'm sure Disney will find a way, and we'll talk about it here.
Shooting puppies on camera. That would be it.
Yeah. Literally just 10 minutes of beating on someone's joints with an iron bar would be better than which brings me to something else, and I know we didn't really script to talk about this. I have actually heard good things about Skeleton Crew, the new Star Wars TV show. Have either one of you guys seen it? Well, we'll have some homework to do. We'll talk about it on the next. By the way, people keep asking about Gamma World, like, oh, a Gamma World TV show again. I think probably Fallout is your Gamma World TV show.
Yeah,
I was going to say it's sort of been done in a million different titles, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, hell, the Planet of the Apes TV series was your Gamma World TV show. Logan's Run was your Gamma World TV show. There have been lots of Gamma World TV shows. You could make the argument that you could watch the Logan's Run TV series, the Star Lost, which was a Canadian TV production, the Planet of the Apes TV series, the Fallout TV series, and Earth 2. You could sit and binge watch all of that and have Gamma World.
Well, you got to start the day after to launch the.
Yeah, but I mean that's just like starting off like gut wrenching,
That's where you want to start. You got to earn it. You got to earn the cool mutations later. You got to earn that.
You need to throw a little Mad Max in there too.
Oh, Mad Max.
Yeah.
That's far down the line. I feel like that's like end game.
Yeah. So if you watch all of those TV shows, you've basically got the state the world is in Gamma World. The City of Domes as kind of the high tech enclave that survived the destruction, is off sequestered by itself, and so there's your Logan's Run, and then what else? Planet of the Apes. You've got ape mutants ruling a part of the country, and then Fallout, people coming out of the vaults in the West. Just a lot of a whole lot of shows you could make up. Oh, and I guess if you wanted to go with the Metamorphosis Alpha is connected to Gamma World, that's where you'd fit Star Lost in. So yeah, it's possible to get a Gamma World TV show, kind of like how Harmony Gold took 3 unrelated TV shows and crammed them together: Macross, Southern Cross, and Mesopedia, Genesis Climber Mesopedia, and just fused them together. You could do the same thing yourself with all those shows that I just mentioned, and have Gamma World. So Sad Monkey says there was a movie called Turbo Kid that was like Gamma World. Haven't seen that one. I'll take your word.
Oh, it's great. I think it came out around 2015, 2016.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
Very silly, but fun.
Now I want to know. Turbo Kid 25. That. So I'm gonna put this up on the screen here. Let me see if I can find a good find a good image for this. Yeah, heck yeah. This looks fantastic. This does look very Gamma Worldy. Oh, and the Detector is. Oh, hell, just based on that alone, I'm going to have to watch a show. Thank you.
It's adorable. It really is.
Those look like my kind of guys right there.
They are precisely our kind of guys.
But speaking of our kind of guys in Gamma World, yeah, so this is... here we go. I mean, yeah, I'm getting strong Gamma World vibes off that. We got a cowboy dude, a metal-faced guy with a robot buzzsaw hand, swords. You got to have the villainous eye patch, right?
I like the guy with the battle axe on a bike, because that's convenient.
The BMX guy with a battle axe. Okay, we're zooming into that. I mean, oh, come on, let me zoom in. It's not letting me zoom in.
Your little slider in the bottom there.
Yeah, it's stuck. It's not. It's not doing the thing anyway. But rest assured, guys, if you check out the Turbo Kid movie poster, you will see guys armed with melee weapons on BMX bikes. I approve of this kind of tomfoolery. So, any other unbreaded business, gentlemen? Anything else we needed to discuss?
Not that I can think of.
For me, no.
All right. So I will be a little bit older the next... Well, of course I'd be a little bit older the next time you guys see me. If you saw me in 5 minutes, I'd be a little bit older. But the Dungeon Delver here is celebrating a birthday next Thursday.
Happy 29th.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is the 24th anniversary of my 29th birthday. And I'm very happy about that. So... any closing thoughts, Yang, before we release these mortals from our psychic control and permit them to return back to their normal lives?
Yes, there is. Next month, we will be on at the Nerd Council of Doom here on YouTube. So go check that out. Go sign up. I just shot a message off from that account, but something happened to it.
Yeah, I'm not. I saw you post it earlier, but there it is at the Nerd Council of Doom. We had a little hiccup with it today getting the live streaming going, but we will have it up and running before next show. So please do Subscribe to our channel, the Nerd Council of Doom. That is where we'll be Nerd Council of Dooming. We have big plans for the council. Don't fear us, but respect us. And
you will see more of my hat.
We will see more of your hat. That's right. There are many, many secrets and lore to be unlocked about the hat. Padre, how about you? Anything in closing, sir?
I've got nothing in closing. I had nothing in opening. I have very little in the middle. I'm just happy to be here, taking over the world, apparently.
Yes. And as for my own self, of course, I'll be back on Monday. Then on Tuesday, we're going to be playing some AD&D over on the Delver's Dungeon and just all kinds of silliness throughout next week. So if you haven't already, subscribe to Yang Yan Zhao, subscribe to the Dungeon Minister, and subscribe to the Dungeon Delver. Until then, everyone.
Sorry, one last thing.
I've
totally forgot.
Go.
Tuesday evening, I will have Pulp Hummock Press. Pulp Hummock won the Ennies last year with Gods of the Forgotten North, and he is about to launch the third part of that, which will finish off that 1E compatible campaign guide. So,
cool.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Well, I will keep my eyes peeled for that. Before we go, though, I do want to give a big shout out and big thank you to Doc Flamingo for a super chat, Gonzalo Lira's bar tab, and Jack Chronicler of the Northlands, who apparently has decided to put my kids through school today. So thank you very, very much, Jack. Thank you all for tuning in. You may now return to your daily lives. We release you from our control. Peace to you all, and we'll see you next time.